Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today we begin with chapter 4 on the essentials of Arabic grammar, an English poem on Arabic grammar. So now that we know the states of the ism in its singular, dual, and plural forms, in this chapter we're going to be taking a look at some of the impactors that affect a word and change its state, as well as some of the fragments that make up a nominal sentence. And of course, this is something that is crucial, right, for us to be able to translate a nominal sentence. So again, chapter 4 on the impactors and fragments. And we're looking here at the prepositions of Nasb, the harf, Nasb. The plural form of harf is حروف, right? So it's a broken plural, which is why we see here حروف النصب, right? The prepositions of Nasb. You know that every ism has specific traits, and you can recognize it in its different states. If an ism has one of these words before it, you'll need to change its state to Nasb. Don't ignore it. إن, أن, كأن, ليت, لكن, لعل. This rule is binding if what follows is an ism, so put a fatha at the end and fear no criticism. So this is pretty straightforward, right? And what we've covered so far at this point, now we know some of the telltale signs that we're dealing with an ism, right? So we know how to identify the ism. We also know the different states of the ism in its singular, dual, and plural forms. And so now we're looking at some of the words that impact the ism and change its state, specifically to the state of nasb. And so these 6 prepositions that are mentioned should be memorized, right? And we're going to dive into their meanings on a basic level. And I've included a chapter at the end where we'll talk a little bit more about the prepositions, but really it's just an introduction. In this chapter, we're looking at prepositions that specifically impact the ism, right? But there are others that have different roles. And I say on a basic level because there are entire works dedicated to looking at the different types of meanings that these prepositions will convey under particular circumstances, right? So that's something that's a much deeper study. This is us laying the foundation. So if an ism has one of these words before it, then you'll need to change its state to nasb. Don't ignore it. So this rule is binding if what follows is an ism. So put a fatha at the end and fear no criticism. So if an ism follows any of these prepositions that were just mentioned, then you need to change its state to nasb. So I say put a fatha at the end here, of course, in the case of the singular ism, but this also includes the extra letters that are added to the ending of a word in the dual and plural form. So inna and anna are typically used for emphasis or to make an assertion. Inna we often see translated as indeed or certainly, right? Anna meaning that. So with regards to these two, let's take a quick look at some examples from the Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ثم إن ربك للذين هاجروا من بعد ما فتنوا ثم جاهدوا وصبروا إن ربك من بعدها لغفور رحيم. So here we see highlighted inna, and right after it رب. Right? We've seen this with Rabbul Alameen, for example, Lord or Master. And this kaf that we see here is the attached pronoun form of anta, meaning you. So this is a type of fragment that we're going to take a look at shortly. What's important though is that we see this fatha here at the end of the word Rabb, right? After inna, indeed your Lord, right? Certainly your Lord. After that is forgiving, merciful. Another thing that we see here is this lam at the beginning of Ghafoor, right? And this is the lam of emphasis. So this lam of emphasis only occurs with the preposition inna. And it's not always used, but when you find it used, it's like an extra form of emphasis. And we'll take a deeper look at this as we're translating, as we're going through sentence structure in the upcoming chapters, inshallah. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to translate these ayat in full. Again, I would encourage you all to go and take a look at these ayat, their translation, and that way you solidify what you're learning and you can retain these words much more easily. And also it will strengthen our connection to and our appreciation for the Quran. So let's take a look at the next example. So we see here in this next ayah, Inna al-dhanna la yughni min al-haqqi shay'a. Inna Allah alimun bima yaf'alun. So we know that al-dhanna is an ism because it has al at the beginning, and we see fatha at the end. So indeed, assumptions do not avail in any way against the truth. Inna Allah, right? So we already know that lafdul jalala is an ism. And we see a fatha at the end here because it's after Inna, right? Indeed, or certainly, Allah knows that which they do. So let's take a look at another example here. Innal abrara lafi na'im. So we see al at the beginning here, right? Which is an indication that this is an ism. And we also see fatha at the end, right? Innal abrara. We also see again this lam of emphasis that only occurs with the preposition inna, right? As a form of extra emphasis. So indeed, the righteous will most definitely be in bliss. Let's take a look at the next ayah here. We see innal muttaqina fi maqamin amin. So we know that al-muttaqin is an ism because there's al at the beginning, and we're also seeing that this is actually in the plural form. So muslimun, musliman, muslimin, muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini, muslimuna, muslimina, muslimina. So muslimina is the plural form of either nasb or jar. In this case, we know that it's nasb because there is a harf of nasb before it. Innal muttaqina. We see this ending here. So indeed, the God-fearing will be in a place of safety. Let's take a look at the next few ayat here. Inna qad uhiya ilayna anna al-'adhab 'ala man kadhaba wa tawalla. So indeed, it has been revealed to us that al-'adhab, right? And we see here fatha at the end, telling us this ism is in the state of nasb. So it has been revealed to us that the punishment will be upon those who have denied and turned away. So let's take a look at the next ayah here. وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي الزُّبُورِ مِن بَعْدِ الذِّكْرِ أَنَّ الْأَرْضَ يَرِثُهَا عِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحُونَ. We've seen the word al-ard many times, right? The earth. And we see here at the beginning al, and we see at the ending a fatha, telling us that this ism is in the state of nasb. Why is it in the state of nasb? Because anna is before it, right? It's connected to anna. So anna has impacted this word and changed its state to nasb. Let's take a look at the next ayah here. أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ. We see here السَّمَاوَاتِ, right? Al at the beginning. What we also see is that this is a plural as well, a feminine plural, like muslimatin, right? Al-muslimati, as-samawati. Kasra here at the end because there's al at the beginning. If you've memorized the chart from the previous lesson, this will be easy to pick up on, right? Samawati, the heavens. Wal-ard. We're going to talk about this harf, wow, right? Typically translated as and, but it's connecting these two words, which is why al-ard has a fatha at the end, right? So it's also in the state of nasb. Samawati wal-ard, the heavens and the earth. And next we have the preposition كأن. So كأن is used to make a comparison, and it's often translated to mean as though. So let's take a look at a few examples from the Quran here. إن الله يحب الذين يقاتلون في سبيله صفا كأنهم bunyanum marsus. So typically what you'll find with this preposition is that it's often connected to a pronoun. And we do discuss pronouns in the next section, but this will be like a precursor to that. So in short, the pronoun is an ism as well. This is the pronoun for they or them, right? Hum. Whenever a pronoun is attached to a word, it is either in the state of nasb or jar, right? In this case, we know that it's in a state of nasb because it's connected to a harf of nasb, ka'anna, right? So ka'anna hum, right? So typically, this is how you'll find ka'anna used, connected to a pronoun. And pronouns are nouns that don't have any declension, so we're not going to see a fatha on it, right? And very soon we're going to be learning about how to identify these pronouns in their attached forms and their detached forms. Let's take a look at the next ayah. كَأَنَّهُمْ يَوْمَ يَرَوْنَهَا لَمْ يَلْبَثُوا إِلَّا عَشِيَّةً أَوْ ضُحَاهَا. Right? كَأَنَّهُمْ. Again, same situation here. It will be as though the day they see it, referring to the hour, that they did not dwell, but an afternoon or an evening. So we see that translation here, as though. It will be as though or as if. Let's take a look at the next ayah. كَأَنَّ فِي أُذُنَيْهِ وَقْرًا فَبَشِّرْهُ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. So looking at this example raises a very important point, specifically pertaining to the prepositions of Nasb. And this is the fact that the ism that is connected to it does not necessarily come right after. So we see here كَأَنَّ, and then we see here وَقَرَى, right, with the fatha at the end, right? So this is the ism of كَأَنَّ. What is between them is a fragment that we're going to be taking a look at actually in the next section, a harf jar and its ism. So there are only two instances where this happens, and this is one of them, where there's a harf jar and its ism right after one of the prepositions of nasb. The other instance is in the case of a dharf and its ism. And a dharf is a word that is connected to a place or time. To avoid any confusion, we're going to get into these things as we're translating and going through sentence structure, right? But this rule and this example is something very beneficial to keep in your notes. And then we have layta, which is typically used in the form of making a wish or desiring something that is usually impossible or highly unlikely. Its usage in the Quran is similar to ka'anna in the sense that it's typically attached to a pronoun. It's also often seen with the harf nida, which I briefly mentioned in one of the previous lessons. Oh, I wish such and such was the case, right? So let's take a look at a few examples from the Quran here, right? We see here, Ya waylata laytani lam attakhidh fulanan khalila. So we see here, layta, and then we have one of the forms of the attached pronoun, meaning I. Allah Ta'ala gives us this description of the state of the wrongdoers on the Day of Judgment, right? Wishing that they would have had a chance to go back and follow the way of the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? Wishing they had a chance to go back and benefit from the guidance of the Quran, right? And so they say here, Ya waylata, like how sorry, how at a loss I am, right? Laytani, right? I wish. Lam attakhidh fulanan khalila. I wish I didn't take fulan, so and so, as a friend. Let's take a look at the next ayah. Qila dukhulil jannah qala ya layta qawmi ya'lamun. It will be said, enter the garden. Qal, right? He will say, Ya layta qawmi ya'lamun. We're gonna go dive into this type of fragment again. This ya at the end here, it's another form of the attached pronoun, ana, right? I or my. Qawmi, people, right? It would be qawma, but because of this ya, it changes for flow. So this is actually in the state of nasb. Ya layta qawmi ya'lamun, right? I wish my people knew. Just make note of this. This is something that we're going to circle back to as we're going through sentence structure and we're translating, inshallah. And then we have lakinna, which is used to correct something or set the record straight. It's often translated as however or but. So let's take a look at some examples of this. Laysa alayka hudahum walakinna Allah yahdi man yasha. Their guidance is not upon you. It's not your responsibility. Walakinna, right? Lakinna Allah, which we know, lafdul jalala is an ism and it has a fatha at the end. Walakinna Allah. So their guidance is not upon you. It's not your responsibility. Actually, Allah guides whomsoever He wills. So looking at the next ayah, the first part of the ayah in meaning, whenever some hardship or difficulty reaches the human being, they call upon us. And then when we bestow upon him some bounty from us, he says, I was only given this on account of my knowledge. How smart I am. I'm genius. Bal, rather, hiya fitnatun walakinna aktharahum la ya'lamun. Rather, it is a test. Walakinna aktharahum. We see on akthara, fatha at the end. Walakinna aktharahum la ya'lamun. But actually, most of them have no knowledge, right? Most of them don't know. Let's take a look at this next ayah. لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ قِبَلَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ. It is not piety that you turn your faces to the east or the west, right, in prayer. وَلَكِنَّ, but actually, we see al at the beginning of bir, telling us that it's an ism, right? And a fatha at the end, making its state nasb. But actually piety, true piety, is reserved for the one who believes in Allah, the last day, etc., etc. And I would encourage you all to go through this ayah as well, ayatul bir. But we can clearly see here how these prepositions are impacting these asma and changing their state to the state of Nasb. And the last one we have here is لعل, which is used typically to convey hope or anticipation of something. It's often translated as perhaps or maybe. So let's take a look at some examples here. الله الذي أنزل الكتاب بالحق والميزان وما يدريك لعل الساعة قريب. So Allah is the one who revealed the book in truth and the balance. وما يدريك, and what will make you realize لعل الساعة قريب, perhaps, maybe the hour is close. Let's take a look at the next ayah here. Again, I would encourage you all to take a look at the translation of these ayat, but to give you a paraphrased meaning so that there is context, Allah is revealing to the Prophet ﷺ in relation to what should transpire should the believers seek to divorce a woman, and reminding the believers that whoever does not observe these limits, they have wronged themselves. And then he says subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا تدري, you don't know. لعل الله, لعل الله, right? Again, we know lafdul jalala is an ism. We see fatha at the end here, right? لعل الله يحدث بعد ذلك أمرا. You never know, right? Perhaps Allah will bring about some change after the fact. Let's take a look at the next ayah. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. We see here لعل. O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed upon you, just as it was prescribed upon those who came before you. لعلكم تتقون, right? We see here لعل. So a pronoun is attached to لعل here. And this pronoun is the attached form of the pronoun أنتم, right? You all. Why was fasting prescribed upon you? So that perhaps you all attain taqwa. And again, we said that any pronoun that is attached to a word, right? It is either in the state of nasb or jar. And here, of course, we know that it's in the state of nasb because we're dealing with a preposition of nasb, la'alla. So this completes our lesson on the prepositions of nasb, حروف النصب. We'll be continuing with chapter 4 in the upcoming lessons, further discussing the prepositions and fragments that make up nominal sentence structure. So inshallah, stay tuned for the next few videos. If you have any questions about specific things that we've covered so far, send an email, leave a comment. Not only is it of benefit to you to be able to gain further clarification on any of these concepts that you may have been struggling with, but you'll also benefit from the ajr, right? The reward and blessings of being able to facilitate that for others. So drop a comment if you have any questions or send us an email. Stay tuned for the next video, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.